Spider-Man 4 is coming, but not from Sony Pictures. And no, that doesn't mean Marvel Studios either. Keep your pants on. Spider-Man 4 is actually a Kickstarter project being brought to us by High Mountain Studios, a collective of film fans that get together and make fan films. And that's exactly what Spider-Man 4 is. It's a fan film. Now, this project has been making some waves recently. A lot of people have been talking about Spider-Man 4, and a number of people have been asking me to do a video on it. So I'm kind of going to talk a little bit about the project and about my expectations for the project. So while this is completely unofficial, Spider-Man 4 will treat itself as a continuation of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, which is something a lot of Sam Raimi fans have been clamoring for ever since it ended. And to be honest, I honestly think this is a positive turn of events, because I love the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, and I also love the MCU version of the character. I also really love fan films, so this is a means of getting to see Spider-Man 4 be brought to life, but through the lens of a fan. So to start off, Spider-Man 4, the fan film, will follow many of the leaked plot information and storyboards of the original Spider-Man 4 developed by Sony. There are of course a lot of blanks to fill in, which they'll be doing themselves. So the main villain, like in the original Spider-Man 4, is the Vulture. This fan film will also feature the fan favorite famous femme fatale that is Black Cat. That was a lot of alliteration for one sentence. I don't think they're going down the route of her being the daughter of the Vulture and going on to become the Vultress. I mean, I'd actually really like if they did that, but I doubt that's happening. As going by concept art, it appears they're going for a very traditional take on the character. So this film also features a host of other villains as well, including Alistair Smythe, Kingpin, Rhino, Shocker, Prowler, and Mysterio. Hey, what do you think was going through the mind of the first person to see a cow and think, yeah, I want to drink what comes out of its udders? Because that's surely how milk was discovered, right? Bit of a tangent there, sorry. So I know what you're thinking, that's probably way too many villains, and when I first heard about that I was like, yep, that is way too many villains. Like, professional films struggle to keep a film afloat with that many villains. They've struggled to do a Spider-Man film with 3 villains in 2 occasions. How the hell does a fan film expect to succeed at that? Well, in Sam Raimi's original version of Spider-Man 4, the film would play host once again to a number of different villains, and we definitely know that included Rhino and Mysterio. But Sam Raimi had very much learnt from Spider-Man 3, he wanted to keep it to just one main villain, so there would be a montage near the beginning of the film where Spider-Man would battle against different villains that Sam Raimi had no intention of using in a film themselves. Which is heresy! You mean to tell me the great Mysterio would never have gotten his own film if the Raimi series continued? Kind of feel like we're a little better off now. We also do have a plot synopsis for the film as well. Okay, here goes. We've taken elements released from the original Spider-Man 4 plans Sam Raimi set down, opening montage of Spidey fighting different villains, Vulture as the main villain, Black Cat, and even the Lizard, etc., and added some of our own, mainly the involvement of the Kingpin instead of Adrian Toome's origin story revolving around yet another forgettable businessman. In this chapter, Peter Parker's life is in another slump. Evicted from his apartment, his relationship is rockier than ever with MJ, his internship at Fisk Industries has ended abruptly when his new mentor, Adrian Toomes, was let go, and now the mysterious thief Black Cat has shown up to turn his life upside down even more. This film will introduce fan favorites such as Vulture, Lizard, and Kingpin, and is definitely going to be one of Spider-Man's most difficult battles yet. So when it comes to fan films, I don't think it's very fair to criticize things like the costumes, the special effects, the locations, because when it comes to mid-production aspects, there are certain limitations for fan films. And to be honest, looking at this and looking at the production elements that have already started, it looks like High Mountain Studios are doing a really nice job of it so far and putting in as much as they can. They started a Kickstarter to get all of the resources that they needed, and it looks as though the budget is definitely going to be on screen. They've got a replica of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit as the suit, so it's gonna look very similar to the actual films in that regard. They've clearly put a lot of time into the web swinging, and it's one of those things where you can tell that they've studied it, how it was done in the original Raimi trilogy, because you can see in the web swinging tests, the camera movements, the lighting, it's all very authentic to the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, and it is extremely impressive, even by real film standards so far. I'd imagine once it's finished and fully smoothened out, it's going to look absolutely superb. The Mysterio costume that they have for his cameo looks absolutely fantastic. Having watched their other fan films such as Rise of Kylo Ren and Boba Fett, I'd say they definitely need to do a lot of research on cinematography and color grading so they can get sort of a Raimi vibe to it, even if it doesn't fully successfully replicate the sheen of the screen that we have with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, just something to kind of emulate the cinematic thrall, I guess. That doesn't mean make this film orange, but like, try thinking about times to shoot it at. Think about maybe shooting this at the golden hour when the sun's going down. Try different techniques for time. But when it comes to pre-production aspects such as plot and script, I think that is the main opportunity for fan films to shine. And I'd definitely say I do have some issues with the plot synopsis we've been given. It's clear that they're taking cues from Spider-Man 2's storyline, where we have Peter basically repeatedly getting trodden on, and the character kind of has to earn a happy ending against impossible odds. So I admire that they've kind of used that as the blueprint for their film. They definitely picked the best Spider-Man film to draw the inspiration from. I do have issues though. One note being that Peter Parker and MJ's relationship is rockier than ever in this film. Surely it can't get much rockier than it was in Spider-Man 3 when Peter actually hits her, and we have the symbiote being the allegory for substance abuse. I feel like the Peter-MJ dynamic at the absolute worst should not be really rocky. I kind of feel like Spider-Man 4 would work well as kind of a redemption story where Peter and MJ are kind of distant from each other now, and much of his arc regarding her is all about sort of pursuing that engagement, earning it. And then by the end, Peter asks MJ to marry him, and then we have that final swing, and the film ends on a very triumphant note. After Spider-Man 3, I think Spider-Man 4 needs a definitive happy ending. And I don't know, maybe we can still get that, but with Spider-Man and Mary Jane's relationship being more chaotic this time around, well, to be honest, how long until it just becomes fatiguing for the audience? I was fatigued by how on-again, off-again Spider-Man and Mary Jane had become by the middle of Spider-Man 3, so the idea that that's kind of continuing into Spider-Man 4, I think that's not gonna be a good thing. And then when you're throwing Black Cat into the mix, it says she's gonna turn his world upside down even more. Is this going to become a love triangle? Because after having 3 films of love triangles between MJ, Peter, and Harry, which Peter has had to overcome, for Peter to then inflict that onto Mary Jane by bringing Black Cat into the equation, that doesn't sit right with me. The thing is, Black Cat often finds it difficult to find a place in stories, even in like Spider-Man Another World. I really like that film, but Black Cat's inclusion in that film is just kind of, and also Black Cat is there, and the way the synopsis reads is just kind of, and also Black Cat is there. Another issue I have is that this synopsis kind of makes a point of saying that Vulture, if he was just another big science guy, would be too similar to previous Spider-Man villains. But then he works as a scientist for Fisk Industries and gets fired. Out, am I? Ring a bell. And he's also a mentor to Peter Parker, who's having the internship at Fisk Industries. Peter Parker, brilliant but lazy. Also ring a bell? I kind of feel like giving all of these villains such a personal relationship with Peter Parker makes New York City feel perhaps a bit too small, a bit too intimate. It's worked in previous films, but I think we all admitted it was starting to become a little bit formulaic. Now, I don't know if by the time we reached Spider-Man 4, this might have been something that was adjusted by then. Or maybe this was just Sam Raimi's way of doing it. The thing is, it was an easy means of layering up your villains was by kind of giving them a personal dynamic to the protagonist. And it really worked very well in Spider-Man 1 and 2, but it did start to show some signs of becoming a little bit tired. I would be impressed if this film could find a very new way of layering up their villains in that same way. I don't want them to just feel like Phase 2 MCU villains though, where they're just like, I want to conquer the world, I'm a bad guy, grrr. But like, come on guys, get inspired. Another thing I find a little bit strange is that Fisk is going to be a primary villain in this, being as he's the one that fires Adrian Toomes. Now I know that Sam Raimi was very reluctant to touch Venom as he didn't feel it went in with his version of the Spider-Man universe, and another reason being is because he drew most of his inspiration from Ditko. Wilson Fisk is more of a Romita Sr. era Spider-Man villain. I mean, I don't know, there was certainly some inspiration from Romita Sr.'s era anyway, so maybe, I know that the Prowler was going to be in the montage sequence that Sam Raimi had planned on using at the start of the film. So maybe Spider-Man 4 sort of feeling like the beginning of a new era, maybe they would have used some villains that were outside of the Steve Ditko era of Spider-Man. I mean, as well as that, he was going to use villains like Mysterio in this montage sequence because he didn't plan on using them in a later film, but once you kind of get past Mysterio, how many Ditko era villains do you really have left that he could play with? But this is kind of the thing, is like the direction of Spider-Man 4 was pretty unclear in the first place, so the fact that they're kind of basing this on the blueprints that we have is pretty commendable. While making Spider-Man 4 should be the adventure of a lifetime is something I would have loved to have done, I gotta say, it's not an enviable position that they're in here. Because if you want to get Spider-Man 4 truly right, you're gonna have to kind of do it in the headspace of Sam Raimi, so it can't really come from your own heart. And that's kind of my biggest issue with this so far, is while the production elements look great, and it looks like they're very much doing things in the style of Sam Raimi visually, in terms of the storyline, it doesn't quite have the feel of a Sam Raimi Spider-Man. At least, not so far anyway. But I think that is where expectation comes into play. I think a lot of people like me, when this project was announced, well, my first thought was, that's never gonna work. You can't do Spider-Man 4 as a fan film. You certainly can't do it justice, but then I saw the visuals that they had, the pre-visualizations, and I thought, well, okay, like, if they've got a good story, then that could totally work, but this story feels not so much like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. It sounds like a Spider-Man story for sure, but not a Sam Raimi Spider-Man story. It feels like a story that draws tropes and inspiration from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, but I'm not really feeling like this sounds like the synopsis of a Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. But you know what, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's me not being fair on this. Like, it's not a Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. It's Spider-Man 4, and it's not made by Sam Raimi. It's a continuation of that story, but it's not necessarily going to have the same spirit as the previous ones. I just think maybe it's the recycled tropes in there, such as the mentor figure going villain getting fired from their post, that's kind of putting me off a little bit. Also the fact that they're digging up more trouble for Peter and MJ. I kind of just feel like Spider-Man 4 needs to have the definitive happy ending for Peter and MJ, unless there's plans for a Spider-Man 5, which there definitely shouldn't be. The point is, guys, you kind of got to treat this for what it is. Spider-Man 4 is not the real Spider-Man 4. It's not made by Sam Raimi, it's not produced by Sony Pictures. It's not going to have the amazing stunt choreography. It's probably not going to be shot in New York. It's not going to be shot on the Araflex 435 camera, and it's not going to be shot on film print 35mm distribution. It is not made by professionals. It is not going to be scored by Danny Elfman or Christopher Young. It's a fan film. You gotta treat it for what it is. And the reason I say this is because this has been bigged up a lot. It's being treated as if this is actually going to fill the void left by the fact that there wasn't a Spider-Man 4. And perhaps if it really is that good, maybe it will fill that void. Maybe it will emulate that feeling. Maybe it will come out and it will feel actually authentic. Maybe I'll be wrong about the plot, but realistically, it's not gonna work that way. And I don't want to see these guys getting ridiculed. I don't want to see these guys getting horrible comments because the film didn't live up to the expectation. Because the film didn't live up to Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. These guys are doing something wonderful here. Whether the end result works or not, whether it actually feels like a Spider-Man 4 or not, whether it lives up to the title or not, they're doing something great here. And it is very well intentioned. And part of the reason I say that is because they recently released an image of the Spider-Man mask for Spider-Man 4. And it's been bought from Spidey for fun. It's a Raimi replica kit, but they've had to glue on the urethane webbing themselves. And you can tell that it's not as precise as it is when it's actually glued on by professionals. It's definitely not as clean as the Spider-Man film suits that we've had over the years, but there's people complaining, saying how bad it looks, and it's just, that's not fair, guys. That really isn't fair. They've sunk a lot of time and a lot of money into preparing this. So here's what I say is, watch it in good faith. Be kind. Understand that naturally there's going to be limitations with this. But I think at worst, it's going to be a good fan film. It's going to be an enjoyable watch. It's going to be a good Spider-Man movie even, and that's high praise. Even if it doesn't necessarily feel authentic as Spider-Man 4, it's still going to be a good Spider-Man film from the looks of things, and the amount of passion that's going into this is just wonderful to see. So yes, to answer the question I've been getting in my comment section for ages, yes, I am looking forward to Spider-Man 4, but color me cautiously optimistic. But what's the worst that could happen, you know? It's not like we've got to pay to see it, and however it turns out, at least it will be an earnest production, so it will immediately have one up on the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, that's for sure. And heck, maybe like Spider-Man Lost Cause, it will wear its homemade qualities on its sleeve and add to the charm. I mean, consider this, Spider-Man Lost Cause was definitely a shoddier product than the Amazing Spider-Man 1, but I like Spider-Man Lost Cause a lot better because it kind of works with it. Plus, it's well-intentioned. It's easy to forgive mistakes when they're not made by professional film studios with millions of dollars to fix anything. What do you guys think? Comment below and discuss, and of course be kind. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below are links to my Patreon and my Discord. And as well as that, I'm going to put in a link to the Patreon page of High Mountain Studios for their Spider-Man 4 fan project, so you can support them. Hey, dude, have you heard about the seminar?
No, what about it?
It's cancelled, dude.
For real?
You didn't get the notification?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, it's cancelled.
Yeah, well, I came all this way for nothing then. Hey, you wanna hang out?
No.
I just heard there was a gunman. Tracy, you gotta get out of there. Tracy? Tracy.
Okay, so I guess the best advice I could give to anybody is this. Evaluate your circumstances, be brave. Be prepared to fail, but always get up. You owe it to yourself to be marvelous, so why regret being anything less? Well said. I'll see you around, buddy.
Channel Pup has been growing more than I could ever have anticipated over this very short space of time, and I'm absolutely honored to see so many viewers participating in discussions and really enjoying my little projects here. But it's not without its obstacles. I'm currently a student studying film and television, and if I want to afford the general costs that come with living, unfortunately YouTube revenue just can't always cut that cheese. I recently moved in with my girlfriend's family, but this is not a permanent thing, it's just for the summer. And last year I've done the whole act of balancing YouTube, balancing a job, and balancing university, and trust me, the content suffers every single time. So to support this channel to maintain the same quality of content and upload schedule, and to just keep making the stuff you guys really seem to be enjoying, I really do urge you to check out my Patreon link in the description below. And in return, you can get early access previews to the special Channel Pup events such as Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man Episode 2, as well as my upcoming Patreon exclusive playlist, Pup's Project Room, which is all unlockable with a pledge of just $1 or more. Now, the world's a tricky place. Not everybody is made of money, and that's fine. Just please be here for my videos. Please don't stop coming back to join me on these discussions, because it means so much to me, guys, really. Well, I guess I best be hitting the old dusty trail. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I've been Channel Pup, and I'll think of a better catchphrase next time. Now please leave me alone!